Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. For some time now I've been making kaleidoscope canes, and some of you might recognise this from some of my social media posts. This was one of my box challenge canes, and as well as making them into bowls and the fronts of journal covers, that sort of thing, sketchbooks, notepads, I also occasionally make them into wall hangings. And I thought it's about time I showed you how I do that. So in order to do that, obviously I needed to come up with a new cane, a new design. So that's what I did, and I've come up with the Kite Twist cane. And that makes a design like this, so much less complex than the one I just showed you. And it's a nice design. This one can be used for loads of other things, and I'll show you how to make a pendant and a set of earrings in this as well. But we'll concentrate on the design bits, as in how to do the background, the cane, how to mount it on the texture sheet, and then obviously I'll show you how to do the wall mounting on the back as well. And I've called this cane the Kite Twist cane because when you put the two bits together, the shape you get in the middle always looks a little bit like a kite, and then we add twists on the outsides as well. And a huge thank you when I mentioned on social media, anyone come up with any names for this one. There were lots of interesting suggestions. A couple of them I wanted to use, but when I checked, they'd already been used for something else. So that's how we ended up with the Kite Twist cane. It's quite a simple cane. Each time I do it, it comes out quite differently, and depending on how you put the strips together, you can have this design or another design, and I'll show you one colour variation at the end where I've done it in both ways, so you can decide which way you want to put it together. So I'd suggest with this one, probably watch right through to the end before you get going, see which way you want to do it and see what you want to make. But a nice cane, this one, and hopefully you'll have fun with it. The equipment we need for today's session is fairly standard polymer clay equipment. I have a polymer clay blade. I sometimes refer to this as a tissue blade or just a blade. A craft knife. A small roller. This is about 1/2 inch or 1.25 centimetres in diameter. A 4mm cable needle or something similar. We just use this to move the veneer. I've also got a couple of additional rollers. All you need is something that's going to be the right size, so these don't have to be rollers. You could use a pencil, a pen, a paintbrush handle, anything that's long and thin and has the same length throughout. So these are just smaller than the normal roller that I use. I use a cocktail stick at one point. To create a texture, you could use a texture sheet. I'm using a little core roller, and this is number 8. To connect the wall hanging, I'm using just little D-rings. These are easily available online as the sort of things that you normally put on frames to hang a picture, so I thought we might as well use them on polymer clay as well. To highlight the texture and to go around the side of our piece, I'm using some Gilder's paste. This is a brand that I like to use called Goldfinger. Obviously other brands are available, and if you don't have any Gilder's paste, you could always just add some silver acrylic paint or use a pen that works with polymer clay around the outside instead. I use a little bit of liquid polymer clay. This is just to put the unbaked clay next to the baked clay. Bacon Bond obviously works just as well, and if you don't have any of this for what we're doing today, just a little bit of PVA glue will just help, just a little bit of extra strength between the two layers of clay. When I'm baking, I bake on a 6-inch 15cm tile. This is just an ordinary tile, and at one point I move on to a slightly larger one, although it would still have fitted, but for what I'm doing and showing the video of it, it was better on a slightly larger tile. And when I bake, I always tent my tile in aluminium foil and pinch it over the top to make sure it's created a nice case, but it's not touching the clay, and then should your oven spike during the baking process, then it won't damage the clay. I use a measuring sheet, and this one is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net. This is the 4 squares to 1 inch one, and I laminate it simply so that I can use it multiple times. They also have one in centimetres if you would rather. A couple of other things that are useful, but you don't need them, but I use them at one point. I've got a stainless steel soap for burnishing, but you could use your roller instead. And if you're using something like a stainless steel soap, then you need something like a bit of wax paper, tracing paper, just to cover over your piece when you're burnishing. And then right at the end, I use some FIMO varnish, and obviously use a paintbrush for that, just to cover over the bits that I've added the Gilder's paste to. But again, if you don't want to use that, or haven't used the gilder's paste, or have used some paint or something else instead, then you wouldn't necessarily need any varnish. At the very end, I show you how I sand the piece to get a lovely smooth finish, and I use various grits of wet dry sandpaper and obviously rubber gloves, but I'll talk you through that when we get to that stage. And again, it's not necessarily something you need to do, it depends on the finish that you want from your piece. When I'm putting my cane slices together, I use a hexagon shape just to give me a heads up as to how to place them. And anything in that shape will work. It's just a little stencil that I've got, which is a particularly good one. So I just mark the corner points and then score in the clay a line across. You can download hexagon shapes online easily, so use anything you've got, just a little cardboard cutout would work. And of course, if you've got an old-fashioned protractor, then you just need to measure 60 degrees for each of your sides, and that will give you the same helping hand as something like this. When I work on a large tile. I will use biodegradable wet wipes and just ordinary tissues just to clean my hands and equipment as I go in case they get messy. And I use a pasta machine dedicated to polymer clay use. If you don't have a pasta machine, you can simply stack layers of playing cards the same on either side, and with your roller, simply roll over the clay until it is the correct thickness that you want. So let's have a look at the clay we need for today's project. I'm going to use FIMO Soft, but all well-known and recognised brands of polymer clay will work equally well for this technique. I'm going to make 2 skinner blends, one between these 7 colours and one between these 3, and this is our outer layer of clay and our little sort of highlight accent colour. For the first skinner blend, I'm going to use emerald green, aqua, lemon yellow, white, mint, apple green and tropical green. For the second blend, we've got lilac, white and raspberry, and this is brilliant blue. And for the amounts, these amounts are 1/4 ounce or 7 grams each. These two are 1/8 ounce or 3.5 grams each. This one is 1/2 ounce, 14 grams, and this one 1 ounce, 28 grams. So the first thing I will do is condition all these clays in their individual colours. And when I mean conditioning clay, I mean chopping it up and getting it into a flat sheet so that it's nice and malleable and all the component parts will be mixed together. And if you're unsure why or how to condition polymer clay, I do have a video on that, and I'll put the details in the information below this one. So I'll get them all done and make them into roughly sort of very, and it is rough, you'll see when we come back, very rough rectangular shapes. And I use a setting 3 on my pasta machine to condition the clay, and on my machine 0 is thick and 9 is thin. So get all of those done, and that's going to be one blend. All of those done, it's going to be one blend. And the same, I'll condition this on setting 3 as well. Put that to one side, and we'll come back to that piece when we need it. The other thing we need is some scrap clay, and I'll go into that next. To create the backing for the wall plaque, that additional bit that goes around the outside, I've got about 2 packs worth of scrap clay here, so sort of over 100 grams, about 4 ounces of scrap clay, and I put it through on the thickest setting of my pasta machine, and that'll give me the base to use later on. And then I need about half a pack, so about 27 grams or 1 ounce of another colour that I think will match with the cane that I have made. So at the moment I've chosen the blue. I might well change my mind once the cane is all put together, and that's the great thing, you can change your mind at any point, particularly once your main part is baked, and see what the background colour you want to use. But just to show you what you will need, so as I've put it through on a medium setting at the moment, so that's setting number 3. However, I have made it that it's roughly the same width size-wise as my backing piece, so that when we get to the stage of deciding whether this is the right colour or not, I can put it through as thin a setting as I need to cover over the whole of this piece, so that we can then set our baked polymer clay hexagon on top to give us the wall hanging that we're looking for. And obviously if you're not doing a wall hanging, but you're doing some other form like a pendant that I'll show you at the very end as well, then you don't need this much. You need a much smaller amount, but you can still use the same principle of having scrap clay with a colour on top, or just use a plain colour to put it in on, whichever you prefer. You will also need, if you're going to do the wall-mounted plaque, a layer or sheet, very thin sheet of scrap polymer clay. And again, this is about half a pack. It's about 28 grams or 1 ounce of polymer clay. And so I've just taken some scrap clay and put it through, and this is on quite a thin setting, so setting number 7. You don't need any particular thickness, you just need something you can lay your slices of veneer onto. And if you don't have any scrap clay, or if you'd rather just use a plain colour, then obviously do that instead. I've conditioned all of these colours, and we'll begin with a Skinner blend between all 7 of these. Now obviously you don't have to do this many, you can do it just a couple of colours, 3, 4, 5, whichever you want to do. But to show you, if you're going to do a large blend between lots of different colours, the same principles apply for a straightforward Skinner blend. So I'm going to go diagonally through the end pieces and then straight down through all the middle pieces. If you're unsure about Skinner blends or would like some extra tips and useful information, then I do have a video on that, and I'll put the links to that below this one. I'm simply going to double up all the colours and then put them together so that the end one sits straight and all the rest are at a slight diagonal. Now I'm not worried about it not being particularly neat, because I know when it goes through the pasta machine this will all become fairly distorted anyway, and you need to manipulate it within the pasta machine in order to get a nice square blend, and again that's what I cover in the Skinner blend tutorial. Give it a quick roll just to make sure those colours are adhered together, and I'm going to fold it in half so that they all slightly overlap each other, and then press the fold and put it back through the pasta machine like that, and each time it comes through, fold bottom to top till I have a nice blend through from one side through to the other. I also want this fairly short in length, so actually shorter than it is at the moment. So length or width wise it's only going to be about this much, so probably between 3 and 4 inches, sort of up to around 10 centimetres in width. And I do that by pressing it up against the side of the pasta machine and making sure that I pull it down and concertina it together slightly, so I end up with that amount of width of Skinner blend. As I'm working my way through, so mine's getting quite long in that direction, so what I will do is I'll put the setting of the pasta machine to slightly thicker, because I was using setting number 2 because I'd got 4 layers when I first put it through, having conditioned it. So now I'll go up to setting 1 and then setting 0 if necessary, so I don't have anything that's much longer than about 6 inches or 15 centimetres. And just to show you what I mean by the concertinaing it, so when I put it through fold first, I will actually sort of push it together like this throughout the length. And again, as I say, I butt it up next to the pasta machine so that when it comes through, each time it gets slightly shorter in the width size. And there we have our blend, gone through on the thickest setting of my pasta machine, so that was setting 0, and I've got a nice sort of size. I'm just going to neaten off one end. We want a roughly straight end as we go, and then I'll see what size we've got. So yes, that's about 5 inches, that's quite a good width. Anything sort of from 4 through to about 6 inches is a good length for what we're doing today. And as I mentioned, you can see there it's 1, 2, 3, so it's just under 4 inches, so just under 10 centimetres wide across that respect. I'm going to find the blue I'm going to use for the accent colour. Now, as before, I conditioned this and put it through on setting number 3, but I want a really nice thin piece. Now, I'm lucky that mine's already the white width that way to go through, so I'm going to put it back through the pasta machine on my thinnest setting, which for me is setting 9, but through it that way, so it comes out with a longer, thinner piece. I'm just going to neaten off one end. And we know we had roughly 5 inches or 12 centimetres. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all I want is 2 fairly smallish strips, which are going to go on either side. So don't worry about me, they're roughly probably about 1 inch. You don't have to be exact, that's 2.5 centimetres. But I'll put the clay back so I can see where it is, so I can know I can take some even slices, and I'm going to put 1 strip at the top and 1 strip at the bottom. And all all we're going to do is then cut this into the 5 slices. And having cut your slices, this is the point at which you can decide which of the 2 patterns you want to do. The one I'm going to do is where it's all orientated in the same way, and to do that we are simply going to lay one on top of the other all the way across the 5 sections. And with the colours I've got today, because I haven't gone that far in difference, I've effectively got green at either end, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference if we put them all together the same way or if we top and turn them. But if you've got particularly different colours going from one end to the other, as I will show you in one of the examples, the other thing you can do is simply turn one the other way up. And then you would alternate one up that way, one up that way, one up that way, and that would give you a slightly different look either end of the piece you were doing. Because we're not doing that, I'm going to put them together so they all go the same way. So we now have our long strip of clay blends having gone together, and what we're going to do now is we're going to push them from either end, because what we're going to create is like swirls and buckles, and this is the point at which everyone's is going to differ slightly because we're all going to push it in at a slightly different rate. That is fine, do not worry. We are looking for a piece that's going to be about 1.5 inches or 4 centimetres in length, and then we're going to extend it that way so it's about 3 inches or 7.5 centimetres along the length of the cane. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little bit of an S curve to give myself a steady start and sort of twist it backwards and forwards and press it in. So we keep just pressing in till we get that lovely distortion on either end, and then we can start pressing in this way to flatten it off. So I'm also going to press it down flat either end just to flatten those out. You see it's starting to come, and now we can start pulling it this way to lengthen it and at the same time shorten it as we push. And it's one of those things like, don't be scared about the clay, you let the clay go where you want it to. As I sort of say to people quite a lot of the time, you are the boss of the clay, not the other way around, so you tell it what you want it to do. And when we're about there, I'm just going to cut it into 2 pieces. And you get to see the pattern that's come through. And I say everyone's pattern will be slightly different because everyone's going to have a different design and a different push down with the swirl. And all we're going to do is, I've got a darker end and a lighter end. You can see there, if I swap it over, you can see the difference. So you can turn it like that if you want to start with. So you've got one going one way and one going the other. And we are simply going to put a point in one end, and we're going to do it in one colour or one colour end on one piece, and then the opposites, that was the dark one, and then the opposites are the lighter one in this piece. So just pull them into a slight point, and then I'm going to put them together. So I've got a point coming off one end, so blunt end going up there, and then the point going next to the blunt end, and a blunt end down here. So I've got a point coming off here and a point going off there. So both the same colours are together there, and you're going to have both these 2 same colours here, and that leaves us a little triangular piece, and that's where our middle section and our middle blend is going to go. It's also useful to have the point here and the point here, because we're going to add a swirl on the cane once we put all the pieces together, and it's easier for you if you think I'm going to swirl where the points are, so you know which 2 corners of our triangle we are going to swirl. So the next thing to do is to make the middle pattern here. The next blend I'm going to do is between the raspberry, the white and the lilac, and again another Skinner blend. As before, diagonally through the end pieces, straight down the middle, and because I've got wider pieces here, I can afford to leave myself a little bit extra where I haven't gone the diagonal straight through to the corner, so that I know I will get a large amount of the lilac left by itself on this end and a large amount of the raspberry. And I didn't do that on the previous Skinner blend because those 2 end pieces were so thin and small, and I wasn't worried about having a particular bit of the colour showing. I just wanted a darker end to the blend that I was doing. So put those 2 pieces together like that, slight roll as normal. Fold in half. Put back through the pasta machine, and because I've got those 4 layers now, I will be putting that back on setting number 2. Not worried about the width or the size that this goes this time, just getting a blend from one side through to the other. When the blend's done, I'm just going to fold that in 2. I could of course have cut it in 2 as well. I'm going to put it at the darker end through the pasta machine on the same setting that I'm currently using, which is setting number 2. Fold always at the side or at the bottom, on this case at the side, so any air, as you can see, that would be in that fold will get pushed through as it goes through the pasta machine. Having put it through on setting number 2, I then went straight down and put it through my thinnest setting on my pasta machine, again the pink end first, to get myself a lovely long thin strip. If you know that your pasta machine shreds or tears your clay, simply go down one setting at a time till you get to your thinnest usable setting. So I'm just going to concertina this backwards and forwards, starting from one end and working my way down, and I'm doing probably about 1 inch, 2.5 centimetres in width. When I'm done, I will simply push it flat on the tile to neaten off and flatten any edges, and then start pressing it in around all 4 sides with my fingers. I want this to be about 3 inches, 7.5 centimetres in length. When we've roughly got that size, I'm going to chop down through the middle, put our 2 pieces together. So you'll have a neat end where the pieces go together and a slightly messier end, and on the messier end we're just going to chop away a little triangle, because that then allows us to pull this over so that the pink fits nicely at the top in the same proportion, and it looks like we've got less of the bit on the inside, and this is now going to go into a triangular shape that will fit inside our cane. And to do that, I'm just making sure that that was the point, evening out the sides, press on that point and that point, and then as always, as you're pressing in, so it's going slightly longer, and I just need this to go to the height that our cane is already, that those 2 pieces are that we've put together. When it's the same height, push that corner back into there, and then you can pull this bit out slightly wider. See, it's almost like going and flaring out at the bottom. Do that both top and bottom. Till we end up with our nice roughly triangular shape. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of detail just on these outer edges with some of our leftover colour that we use to create these stripes on the inside. So take some of your leftover bits, make sure there's no air trapped inside, and roll it into a long thin sausage. In order to do a kaleidoscope, you want this sausage log to be relatively even, so I'm just going to take the back of a nice clean tile and just roll that over the length, and that gives you a nice even piece to insert. So I'm going to find myself a rod that's roughly the size I need. You could go larger, I could have used my clay roller, but seeing as that's roughly the same size, what I'm going to do is in this gap area, light area here and here, and along here. At the bottom, it's completely up to you whether you do it centrally or whether you do it towards one side. I'm going to do mine slightly towards this point where we've got this pointed corner. Because remember me saying we were going to do a spiral in this, so I'm going to put mine towards this side so that hopefully it'll be just caught up slightly in that spiral. But say completely up to you where you put yours. And all we do is we push that in till we create a groove on the side, and pop the clay in, repeat on this side, push in and pop the clay in, and as I said, going towards that spiral side, I'm going to put mine just inside the pink and pop him down there. So now we have our triangular cane, and we're just going to change, as I said, a couple of little bits and pieces. First things I'm going to do is just press it so that each of the three sides are nice and flat, because obviously we've got those extra bits in. So just turning it on one side and pressing it flat. Turn it and press it. Turn it and press it, and I'm making sure that I've got three nicely formed corners. So the first corner we're going to spiral is this one down next to our additional triangle, and I'm going to pull it up and around this way. And all I'm doing is from where the blue insert is and so a little way down this, I'm just literally pressing in all along the length and then pulling it up till it's really nice and quite thin. And making a point right at the top and trying to keep it fairly even along this edge as well. So you can see there, I've really pulled it up quite a bit, and having pulled it up, turning it away from our central pink colour, I'm just going to pull that over and twist it round to create a spiral. And I've done it so that that blue insert I added is actually now along the top. Press it in slightly, and then I'm going to make that now our new top point of the triangle. So that was one of the pointed ends. Here's the other pointed end, so I'm going to do exactly the same. Press in halfway down, pull it up, and this spiral went this way, so I'm going the same way around. But of course it's completely up to you what you do. If you wanted to do it the other way around, that's absolutely fine. I just do the two spirals. Of course you could do three spirals and do it on the other corner as well, and say whatever you want to do. Just create your own cane, but these are the techniques and these are how I do the different bits and pieces. So again, I've pulled that one up, and again we will spiral it by just pulling it around and twisting it over. And then I will press in to now make that our new point. So we have a swirl here, we have a swirl here, and this bit's going to stay straight, and now we can reduce it down in that triangular shape until we get it to the size that we can kaleidoscope. So all I do when I do that is I turn it round and I press in along the bottom, nice even pressure with your fingers pushing in whilst at the same time pulling slightly longer. Rotate and press. Rotate and press, and I continue to do that in a nice even motion until we have the whole thing size along each side that we're looking for. And for me, I'm going to, it's about an inch along each side. Every so often I will just turn up on the ends to make sure those are pulled out and stay nice and square, and I'll carry on reducing that, and once it gets close I'll move on to the measuring sheet, but I'll fast forward through that process until we get it down to the right size. When I've got it down to the size that I want and fairly even along the length, then I will just take off an end and we'll just see what we've got pattern wise. And so you put it together, you've got that lovely pattern in the middle with our little sort of blocks, and then this blue's going slightly into there. Probably would have been nicer if I'd have added a bit more, and if I was doing this cane again, then I will add a larger bit in there, so that it hasn't gone quite so much and been squeezed out so much on the side. But I like the colours, and I think it's going to give a lovely effect when it all goes together in a kaleidoscope. Whilst our cane's resting, I'm going to find that sheet of thin polymer clay, the scrap polymer clay that I mentioned at the start, and this is one I'd put through on setting number 7 of my pasta machine. And I've got here a 6-inch tile because I know my hexagon will fit on top of this, so I'm just going to lay this neatly on the top and give it a roll to make sure there's no air trapped inside. If you find any bubbles, you just lift it up till you push them to the outside, or of course you could pop them instead if they're right in the middle. And then I'll just trim away the edges. So we've got a nice neat base to work on. So I've spent a bit of time getting rid of any small bubbles, as I say, just popping them with a craft knife and getting rid of any air. So our piece is now ready to lay our slices on. And the reason we do it on the tile is because it's easier to do it at this stage and to get this piece nice and flat on the tile. And we know if this piece is flat, then any of the veneer we put on top will also be flat. Once the cane is rested and you've got your clay ready to mount it onto, we can start taking slices. If you just wanted to do a small hexagon, making something like a pendant, then you only need 6 slices. If you want to do a middle hexagon with just one layer of cane around the outside, that's 24 slices. If you want to do the hexagon, the outer layer, and then a layer around the outside of that, that is 54 slices that you'll need, and that's the one I'm going to do. When I take slices, I sort of do it towards me and do it sort of so I can see either sides. I hold the blade towards the middle and then sort of gently press down till I take as many slices as I like. I do it with my head right over the top, which is no good for the cameras because all you see is the top of my head. And I take slices that are probably sort of 2 to 3 millimeters in thickness. However, just take the thickness of slices that you can be most consistent in, and for the amount of clay that you've got as well, obviously. If you want to get practice in taking slices, there's nothing better than just getting a whole load of old scrap clay, putting it down into the same sort of triangular cane as we've got here, so the same shape, and just practice. You can push it back together and then just practice again. You can, of course, get some slicing machines, and they are fantastic for giving you even slices, so do that if you would prefer. So whatever you need to take nice, even slices to create our pattern. When I'm doing a large hexagonal kaleidoscope, I've got a little hexagon template, and I will mark myself my hexagon lines. You can do exactly the same. You can download something online if you want to, just to give yourself a helping handy guide. And I take my slices and I do them in sets of 3. You don't have to do this. You can do it one at a time if you want to. What I tend to do is to find a way to sort of put them together. So I'll put them together so that the 2 match. And then I've got a little green swirl down here, so I'll find the green swirl on there and put that one together so that it matches. And I then put them together in a rough set here so that I can move them straight over onto the hexagon. However, I say you do not have to do that. You can absolutely just do it one at a time, place one on here, then another one, then another one. Do whatever you want to do, how you want to do it. But so I then build them up by putting them on there. Just use the lines as a marker and build up so you get a nice match as you go, and you can manipulate them whilst they're here to make sure that each bit matches up. And just take your time and sort of marry them up and work your whole way around until all of these have been transferred over onto here. Once I've spent a bit of time and got the pattern matched as best I can, at this stage I will take away the excess clay, not quite up to the edge but pretty close to the edge of my hexagon from the tile. And I do that simply because I have a terrible tendency to stick my fingers in it, and then I can transfer the scrap clay onto the surface of the design. And one thing I should say, there are a few extra tips and techniques that I use when I'm putting these together, which I won't show you here because they're part of a tutorial I sell on Etsy, and of course it wouldn't be fair to those people who've paid for the tutorial to then show you all of those, but I will put a link to it for anyone who's interested in that as well, and it's the bowl tutorial that's in my Etsy shop. So cut away the excess, and then we're going to just do a little bit of final adjustment just to neaten off our hexagon. And what I'm trying to do is to make it as neat as I can at this stage, so that when it comes to the finishing stage, if I want to sand it, I have to do as little sanding as possible. So I will take my cable needle, and not with a point, but slightly sort of down towards one end, I will just work my way down the seams, making sure that all those seams are neatly joined and that the clay is together. And I'll do it methodically, starting from one seam, going the whole way down, then working down this one, till turn it around, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, and then turn it again. So again, nice methodical so that every seam is neatly joined, and then when you're finished, you can either roll over the top of it to get it nice and flat, or with something like a piece of wax paper, put wax paper over the top and burnish it with something like the stainless steel soap. Whichever way, get it as neat and as flat as you possibly can, and when we've done that, I will bring you back and we'll neaten up the edges and get this piece ready to go in the oven. Having got as neat a finish as you can, and I did mine with the wax paper and the stainless steel soap, all I'm going to do now is just neaten off the edges, and depending what you've done, if they're quite neat anyways, then just take off the excess scrap clay. It may be that you need to shave away a tiny bit all the way around, or you might just need to neaten up the edges of your actual clay and chop away the bottom. But whichever way you want to do, just give yourself nice straight edges all the way around your 6 sides. And our piece is now ready to be baked. As always, I will tent my piece with aluminium foil completely over the top and encapsulating the tile to make sure that if the oven spikes for any reason, it's not going to harm or burn the clay. And I will bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay I am using. So we'll get that baked, and once it's baked, then we can start moving on to creating the rest of our wall plaque. When the piece finished baking and was nice and cool, I started sanding. Again, you don't have to do this as a finish, but if you've never felt a piece of really beautifully sanded and polished polymer clay, then you won't quite understand why I do it if I have the choice, because it feels like a piece of polished stone. It's absolutely beautiful finished surface to it, and you get the lovely shine. You can of course varnish or add additional surface decorations, but for what I'm doing today, I'm going to do the sanding. I've already done it and I've finished already, but I thought I'd just quickly talk you through the process. So as you can see, I'm on my workbench here. I've got a towel that I sit this on, and because it's a nice flat piece, I actually sand on my tile. So I hold the piece and I smooth over with the sandpaper as we go. This is the last grit I use, which is the smoothest one. As the sand rubbings come off as I sand it, so I use a tissue to mop all those up so I can dispose of those safely. Once I've finished, this is a towel that I use all the time for sanding, and you can see here how it collects. I will let this dry, and then I will scrape all these pieces off and again dispose of it safely. And the same with the water. So I've got water here that I've been using, so any water that's got any sand shavings in it, I will strain through a very fine cotton cloth, and then when that's dry, again dispose of the shavings safely and environmentally healthily way. So it's wet dry sandpaper. As you can see, this is wet because I've just finished using it, and for something like this I will start with 180, 240, 320, 400, 600, 800, 1000, 1500, and then I finish off with the 2000. However, as I say, you don't need to do that, but for what I'm going for the nice lovely shiny finish, that is what I will do. So I'll finish taking off the rest of the bits, and I'll once I've taken all these sanding pieces away, I will just go and wash that and dry it. Wash it in cold water and dry it off, but you can already see here probably what the shine's going to be like when it's finished, and that's what you get with that high sanding right up to the very high grit. So I will clear all this away responsibly and bring it back, and then we'll set this piece onto the backing piece. Our piece is dry. It's lovely, lovely smooth on top with all that sanding. I haven't polished it at this stage because I've got a couple more bakings that we're going to go through to make the wall plaque. And also the same, if you're going to do something like varnish, obviously don't do it at this stage. Do it after the piece is completely finished and there's no more baking going on. So the next thing I want to decide is whether I want to add any additional decoration around the side, and I will quite often use gilder's paste when I'm doing this. And Goldfinger is a brand that I like. Other brands, of course, are available. And with this one, all you do, I'll have a biodegradable wet wipe handy to clean my fingers as we go. And I'm simply going to push it up and rub it on the side. And I do it at this stage before I add it onto the backing piece, as it's easier to get my finger along that side and do it now, rather than try and do it when it's attached to a sheet on the back. And I'll go all the way around the outside doing the silver till I've got a nice silver edge to my piece. So I've got a nice silver edging. And just a quick tip for you, if you ever then make a mistake or you've got gilder's paste on your hand or it then goes on your finished piece, two things you can do. One, of course, you could just sand it off, but if you've got a pure acetone or a little bit of a rag or cotton or something and then just wipe that over, it takes away any gilder's paste straight away. Next thing to do is to find that nice large slab of scrap clay that we had earlier. So that big slab I mentioned at the start, sort of 4 ounces, just over 100 grams of clay, and we're just going to lay it flat on the tile and give it a roll exactly the same as before, making sure there's no trapped air. And this was the one that went through the thickest setting of my pasta machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it off completely outside the area that I now want to go, so much bigger than the area I'm looking for. Because we don't need to get all of the clay textured, only the bit we're working on. So I now know the size of clay that I want to cover with our top sheet. And I said at the start that I wasn't sure whether or not I'd stick with the blue. But having put that on, I think I am going to, because it really does pick out. It's the same blue obviously as the dots I put in, and it just makes those dots come more to the fore and also pushes that pink slightly to the back. So I probably will go and stick with that colour that I chose at the start. So at the moment it's on a medium setting, so I'm going to put it on a thinner setting, and I just want a piece that's going to be big enough to fit right over this piece of scrap clay that I've got. So I've gone down to setting 8, and that will fit over the slab of clay. So as before, with the roller, trying to make sure there's no air bubbles, press that layer into the one below. So with the air bubbles, I made sure I'd either got them out the side or pushed them towards the middle, because this piece is going to be sat underneath our patterned plaque, so you're not going to see that, and then just pop them as before with my craft knife. And now we need to texture around the edges. Because I don't need a very wide texture, I'm just going to use this little core roller. If it's going to stick, then you can use some cornstarch or corn flour, just dab it along the top, but from what I've done in the past, this should work fine. And I'm simply going to roll it over, then turn it and repeat, going around all 6 sides. And I'm not worried, because this is a fairly random pattern, it doesn't matter where it overlaps. I'll just sit that on and check that I have got the pattern all the way around the outside, which I have, so that's fine. And then with a bit more of the gilder's paste, I'm going to repeat what I did, put a little bit on my finger, and then just rub it over to bring out the surface. And again, just checking that I've gone all over the size I need to do. Put that to one side for a second, because we're going to add some liquid clay to the back of our baked piece. Not a huge amount, just enough to make it tacky and let it adhere nicely. And just place your baked clay on top of the unbaked. I'm just going to give it a tiny wipe just to take any away liquid clay. And now that that piece is sat firmly on there, with my little roller that I'm using as a guide, I can place that up the outside, and with my blade cut off a nice even border the whole way round. And our piece is now ready to bake. As before, I will tent the whole thing in aluminium foil, making sure it's not touching the clay, and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And once that's baked, the last thing we will do is put all the stuff on the back so it can hang nicely on the wall. I've decided which way up I'm going to put it, so I decided for this one I'm going to do it so the points at the top. Of course you could do it so the square lines at the top, whichever way around you want, but I've done it so the points at the top, and I've then with a ruler found a middle place where I want the lines to hang. They're actually in line with the 2 points here, and I've measured out 3 centimetres or just over an inch from either side, and this is where the 2 D-rings will hang, and these are ordinary mounting points for doing your paintings, and they work very well on polymer clay as well. And I actually mount them so that the rings will eventually flip back that way, so that some wire or some string just hangs between the two, and they go in towards that way. I've just, with a pointy tool, just done a tiny little spike down, so I've got a little tiny hole, just enough so the cocktail stick will stick up in it, so that I can put these in the right place. I have taken some of the clay, the scrap clay that we used for the backing sheet, the leftover, and put it through a setting number 3 on my pasta machine, so a medium setting, and I've made one piece of a strip that's longer where my 2 points are, and then a couple of smaller pieces which will fit underneath the D-rings. So the first thing to do is to put some liquid clay or some bacon bond on the area where we're going to sit the D-rings and the excess strip of clay. Then, because we want to make sure these are nicely adhered and pushed down into the clay, I'm going to set the D-ring on the little extra clay piece that I've done, push the cocktail stick through, and I can then find the hole and locate the hole where it needs to sit, and then push it down with that D-ring in situ, so that I know I've got a nice straight line. And I'm going to push down really quite hard so that D-ring is completely embedded in the clay, and make sure that I'm still in place for where that hole is, and then repeat on the other side. I can then trim away the excess clay. And making sure they are both aligned where I want them, sit the excess clay on top and up and around the D-rings, and then chop that off where the D-ring is going to pull up. Repeat on the other side. And that is now ready for the final baking, and I'll bake it flat on the tile that way down. As always, tent the whole thing in aluminium foil and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay I am using. So there's our finished plaque, and I have now polished it on a buffing wheel to give that lovely shine. If you don't have that, then a nice sort of cotton cloth or even sort of denim cloth, just to give a proper shine right over the top, will make it nice. And because this is going to be something that I could handle, I've also just added a layer of varnish around the bits that have all the gilders paste on, and I use the FIMO gloss varnish, but obviously other brands are available depending on what brand of polymer clay you are using. Only thing left to do is to put some wire or some cord on the back, and it's ready to hang as a wall hanging. A nice addition to any room with a pattern on the front, and of course you can use whatever pattern you like. I just chose the Kite Twist cane as a new cane design to show you, and to show you how the wall plaques go together. One other thing that's worth bearing in mind, if you're not overly happy with a cane, so my preference would have been to have slightly less of that pink by itself in the middle. You can always take, even if you've reduced it down, you can take a small part of it, just chop out the bits you're not keen on, and then push that together and reduce it down, and then you've got less of the pink. And I did that with a little piece that I used to make the pendant, so I took that amount out, and that left me, as you can see, with proportionally much less of the pink in the middle. So that's another option, so you can always change things if you're not happy with them. And as an alternate, of course you don't have to do a wall hanging, here's a little pendant that I've made, done in exactly the same way, and we're just about to put the something on the back to make that into a pendant. And for this one, this is the cane where I'd reduced that extra bit and taken that extra piece of pink out, so it's giving you a smaller middle section of the pink. So I'm again going to decide which way up I'm going to put it, so let's put it that way up. And with the same backing clay, I've just taken a small rectangle, a little bit of liquid clay on the back end, take something like the cable needle or whatever size you want that you're going to fit round a piece of thong or chain or whatever you want inside. Press that down. Press the two sides together. You can neaten them off if it's become a little bit untidy. And then that just sits in the middle and out of view on the back. And as before, just bake that the same way we're rebaking the wall plaque. And I will generally twist the cable needle to release it before we bake it. That'll be where the cord goes through, and then when we've finished we will add some of the gilder's paste on the outside of this so that it matches that level as well. And for anyone who'd rather do jewellery, we've got the pendant that I made, so I showed you there, which has got the piece on the back, and I just added a triangle of slice of cane on the back, and that has also been sanded and polished, and exactly the same with the gilder's paste around the outside, and just put on a piece of Boona cord. And the earrings were made very simply on a plain bit of blue background with the texture sheet rolled over the top, and then the gilder's paste on top. And for these I just cut 2 thin slices of the cane, put them going in opposite directions, and obviously rolled them together to make it a neat diamond. Set that on top of the blue background, and I didn't wait for those to be baked first. I put them on unbaked, so it's a nice quick technique. So unbaked onto the top because it's such a small piece, and then this time I just used a cocktail stick round the side and then cut down in exactly the same way as we did. And then once they've been baked and they're all finished, and I put a little hole in at the start. Once they've been baked and finished, then these ones have been just varnished, so nothing else on those, but obviously I did some of the gilder's paste on the back, let that dry, and then varnished the whole piece, including the top, so no sanding and polishing in that one. And then they were just finished off with some little jump rings and the fishhook earring pieces. So again, some nice easy earrings. So whether you want to do a wall plaque or jewellery, whatever you want to do, the Kite Twist cane is quite a nice one to do it with. Here's another colour example for you, and these were done doing exactly the same colours. This one, where I took all the individual stripes, I placed them same way up, exactly as we did on today's tutorial, and on this one I alternated, so I turned one upside down, the other one and the other one, so this is why you get this sort of slightly different stripe effect in the middle. So 2 different looks from the very similar starting point in the cane. And in this one, that middle darker blob, which was on the outside, as you can see, went up towards the middle in the same way as it did with ours. And in this one, I've placed it more in the middle of the triangle piece. So much more in the middle here, and therefore it stays as a distinct blob without being pulled up when we do the twist. So the colours for this one, I only had a mix of 5 colours on the background Skinner blend, not 7. So it was a little bit of emerald green, then mint, into white, into peppermint and brilliant blue, and then the accent colour here was the dark blue, that's the navy Windsor blue. And then for the middle little triangular piece we had a sort of a peachy dark red, which was a mix between ruby red and peach, and then into the peach and into the white. As I say, both exactly the same on either one, but that one slabs laid all together the same way, that one alternating them. And this particular colourway, I've only done the one that we did today, with the slabs all going the same way up, not where I then alternated between the two. And the colourways for this one, it's gone very dark in the middle because that's because I had a little bit of chocolate brown on the end. So it's chocolate brown, tropical green, sunflower yellow, through to white, through to lemon yellow, then into mint and into emerald green in the middle. The accent colour here was the same, Windsor blue or sort of midnight navy blue, and then the triangular piece was brilliant blue into white and into raspberry. And I should probably add, all of these I've done without any backing and the extra additional sheets. And with so many veneers that I'm now making, and I know some of you aren't interested in making the big veneers, I have actually got some of these up for sale in my Etsy shop. So again, I'll put the link to that in the details below this one. Well, that's it. That's this tutorial finished. A nice little technique, whether you want to make a big wall plaque, or some pendants, or some earrings, whatever you want to do. The Kite Twist cane in Polymer Clay. I hope you enjoyed that one, and don't forget all of my tutorials you can intermatch. So for instance, you could do any one of the canes I do as a wall plaque, or as a pendant, or in any other way you want to use them. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully you'll join me next time when we can have some more Polymer Clay fun. Bye for now. Bye.